Between January and April of this year, my store running on WooCommerce faced so many issues between hundreds of fraud orders, slow loading time, plugins breaking my site, reCAPTCHA blocking checkout, and more that I decided to shut it down and start over. I challenged myself to open a new store in 30 days, starting on April 3rd and opening on May 3rd. Here's everything I learned in the process. I opened my store with Shopify, and this video isn't sponsored at all, by the way. I spent a long time comparing different options between Shopify, Squarespace, and other e-commerce website builders, and while I wish I had given myself more time to test things hands-on, I chose Shopify for the following reasons. Squarespace is a website builder that's made primarily with content management as its first focus and e-commerce second. Whereas Shopify, the one I chose, was built with commerce, both e-commerce and in-person, in mind first, and has broader features supporting this. Second, and this was my main deciding factor, is that Shopify gives you full access to all of your website's source code. I'm a tinkerer, and while I don't know enough about coding and web development to build something from the ground up, I often modify existing systems to suit my needs. It's a little bit of a dangerous habit. It gets me into trouble sometimes. I do break things, and Shopify allows me to tinker and get in there in the code and modify whatever I need to. Squarespace doesn't allow that. Another neat feature about Shopify that I learned is that they will help you track which states you're close to reaching Nexus in, which is a huge help in determining liabilities for sales tax in each state. Shopify also integrates with more than 800 apps to extend the functionality of your store. I'll get into apps later because there are some that I think are absolutely necessary. However, despite all of that, I still ran up against a ton of trouble when starting my store. I've been documenting this process on TikTok and YouTube Shorts, and if you've seen some of them, you might have seen some of these issues I ran up against. The biggest and most concerning to me was that in Shopify, the fact that this address displayed right here where it says billing information is displayed publicly across multiple areas, including the default return address, the footer address from marketing emails, and the default contact info in your store. What's more concerning is that I had 2 support agents tell me explicitly that this address was only stored privately, and it took me speaking to a third person to solve this issue. The fact that the support team is not knowledgeable about where public information is being displayed publicly is, in my opinion, pretty egregious. Thankfully, the solution was pretty simple. It's just you put a PO box or a virtual mailbox in the slot that says billing information. And I've confirmed with the billing department to ensure that this wouldn't have an impact on billing cycles, but it's just something that's so completely unintuitive and I never would have guessed it myself. Shopify has a lot of options and different menus, some of which override other options and create conflicts and contradictions. And setup can be very confusing for somebody totally new to the process like I was. Thankfully, all of my issues did have fairly simple solutions, and I didn't run into anything that completely stopped me from opening my store. However, I did spend a lot of my 30-day timeline that I gave myself troubleshooting problems caused by Shopify's settings. And sometimes I do wonder if I would have been better off choosing a different platform. The learning hurdle is definitely something to keep in mind if you're thinking of starting a store with Shopify. That's a tongue twister. That's the best take you got. Thankfully, not everything was as difficult as navigating Shopify's labyrinth of settings. Designing my pages was a breeze, and adding new products is fairly simple and straightforward. And by giving products categories and tags, you can allow shoppers to filter exactly what they're searching for. Categories can also be set up automatically based on a tag, title, and many other things in your product listing. This simplifies the process immensely. I love that I don't have to go into each individual product listing and add every single category that product belongs to. Simply by giving the product a title that contains short sleeve t-shirt, it's automatically added to the apparel category, the t-shirts category, and the short sleeve shirts category. That saves a lot of time and work on my end, especially for somebody who has more than 100 products. Shopify has a drag and drop editor that lets you design your web pages easily. I did learn, however, that the design options are fairly limited, and it takes a lot of work, especially on the free themes, to create a site that doesn't look generic and like a stock Shopify template. To help make my site stand out and look more unique, I utilized the ability to modify my theme's source code, as well as implemented some apps that create new sections for me to use in my store. Speaking of apps, Shopify has thousands of them. This can be overwhelming, but I think there are a few that are absolutely necessary, and there are a lot of others that are just pretty nice to have. In the necessary category, I would put a GDPR and cookie consent app, Why this isn't built into Shopify, I don't know. But I don't want to be breaking any laws, so I consider this necessary. Another thing that I think should be built into Shopify is automatically generated stock keeping units. A product listing cannot be saved without an SKU, and keeping track of product SKUs manually is a really big pain in the ass. The app that I use automatically generates a product SKU based on the parameters that I set and ensures no duplicate SKUs are generated. Another necessary app is a review app. It's so important to generate social proof by allowing customers to review your products. If you're not doing this already, you should be doing this. I'm really not sure why this feature needs an app. Like, all of these necessary ones are things that I think should be built into Shopify automatically, but thankfully there are plenty of free options. There are also a couple of paid options for apps that automatically send coupons to reviewers. A little bit of extra incentive can help generate reviews for your products. These next two apps are still necessary in my opinion, but slightly less vital. The first is a back in stock alert app. If a customer wants something and it's out of stock, it can be really disappointing, but using an app that lets them sign up for email alerts for restocked items can help you generate sales without you having to do a whole lot of extra marketing. And a multi-channel synchronization app, if you also sell on platforms other than Shopify. I have an Etsy and I keep it open because VAT laws in the UK and EU are way too complicated for the rusty cogs floating around in my skull. However, it can be a hassle at best and dangerous for your business at worst to have to manually keep track of everything's stock between multiple platforms. Inventory synchronization apps will automatically keep track of sales on all of your platforms and sync inventory between them. This kind of app doesn't apply to everybody since you might only be selling on one platform, but for those who do sell in 2 or more places, I consider this necessary. Some of the nice to have apps that aren't especially necessary but are just good include a wish list app. While I don't think you need a wish list feature, it's nice to allow your customers to save products for later. Some apps will also automatically alert your customers if items that are on their wish list go low in stock or on sale, which can be a nice bit of automatic marketing. A product bundle app. Sometimes you have a collection of items that go really well together and can be sold together, but setting aside the stock for that can be troublesome. This app allows you to create product bundles which display as an upsell on each of the individual product pages in that bundle. It automatically applies a discount when all of the items in the bundle are added to the cart, which not only keeps stock synchronized since it simply detracts stock from each of the items in the bundle, but it also creates an upsell opportunity to help generate more sales. There are a lot of different use cases for this besides just grouping similar items together. You can have a build your own bundle where the customer can pick one of each of a different category of item and make their own collection of personalized items. The last really nice to have app that I've been using is a section design app. Some apps simply help create more interesting sections for your store's design. This expands the range of what can be done on a Shopify page and helps you design sites that don't look as generic. It's definitely not necessary to function, but it was absolutely vital for me in creating the site that I wanted to make. And especially with how limited some of Shopify's themes are and how they can very easily look quite generic if you don't do anything to modify them. This was extremely helpful in breaking out of that template that Shopify gives you. Some of these apps are a monthly subscription, and if you're paying for a lot of apps, it adds up quickly. It's important to pick and choose which of these features are the most important to you and what you're willing to pay for, versus what you're willing to do on your own or just find an app that's free but may have fewer features. The apps I'm currently paying for include the SKU generator, which thankfully is not very expensive at all, and the inventory synchronization because it's important for keeping stock accurate between my Shopify and Etsy stores. If you run a store either on Shopify or elsewhere, what do you wish you had known before you started? I want to chat with you in the comments. Now that my store's been open for a while and I've shipped a few orders, I've also discovered that the fulfillment process for print-on-demand orders is much easier than it was on WooCommerce. Particularly when you get an order that contains both ready-to-ship items that I have in stock and print-on-demand items. In WooCommerce, I used to have to manually split those orders so that the shipping information would be accurate. In Shopify, it already handles those shipments separately, even though they're in the same order. I just have to push a button to request fulfillment of the print-on-demand items, and then when I ship the in-stock items, they're automatically treated as a separate shipment. And the packing slip will contain a text that says your order contains items in a separate shipment, letting the customer know that they're not missing items from their order, and those items will simply ship separately. I used to have to handwrite this on all of my packing slips, and now I just don't have to worry about it. Despite having a rough time ironing out the kinks of all of Shopify's settings, now that everything's up and running, it's been pretty smooth sailing. And I have a site that runs faster, has better support, and has fewer critical issues cropping up all the time. But there is just this one issue. The last thing I learned is that the name that I chose for my brand is an Undertale fan character ship name. And those characters are the first thing that come up when you Google my brand name. You know, that's just how it goes sometimes. Thanks for watching. If you want to start selling your art, check out my latest video on the more than 60 products you can make with your art. Till next time, stay weird.